Welcome to the briefing session of the Forsyth County Board of Commissioners. This briefing today is for the 1st of April, 2021, and to get into that in detail, all 20 items, is our County Manager, Dudley Watts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yep, so we'll have these items to introduce for April 1st. We also have just one discussion item. Thought we would spend just a little bit of time with the little bit we know about the Federal Rescue Plan Act. Just talk a little bit about that because there's a lot of conversation. And then we do have one item for closed session. So we'll go ahead and dive into the briefing items and hopefully be pretty efficient. We actually have 3 planning items that are UDO ordinances. And so the first one is a public hearing on an ordinance amendment proposed by Planning and Development Services staff. It amends the section related to traffic impact study standards. And I believe David Reed's going to handle this one. David, are you on the line?
Yes, sir.
All right, very good. You've got the floor.
Okay, I'll try and share my screen here. Okay, can you see that?
See it very well.
All right, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, this is UDO CC6. The petitioner is the Planning and Development Services staff, and the request is to amend the traffic impact study standards to align with current practices. Traffic impact study, or TIS, is prepared by a transportation engineer and provides detailed information on the impacts of large developments, what large developments will have on our road network. The Metropolitan Planning Organization, or MPO, and NCDOT use information from the study to recommend necessary improvements to our existing roads to mitigate the impacts of these proposed developments. This text amendment is intended to update and clarify the TIS requirements that were originally adopted in 2001. Most of the text in the amendment remains the same regarding the requirements for a TIS, and the changes are really some unnecessary text was removed and some text was reorganized to better match the style of the recently updated UDO. The substantive changes relate to the types of development that are required to provide a TIS at the time of development application. Since the standards were originally adopted, many significant development projects have included a TIS as part of the site plan review process. Because the current language does not apply to residential development and does not include specific language requiring a TIS for any review process other than a special use zoning, studies have been requested rather than required. Ours is the only large North Carolina community where residential development is excluded from the TIS requirements. The MPO and NCDOT staff often identify the need for a TIS during preliminary reviews based on the trip generation of a proposed development, regardless of the development type. Although these studies are warranted, this can come as a surprise to a developer if he's reviewing our ordinance in advance of meeting with us, since the language in the ordinance is not consistent with our practice. Staff contacted development community representatives and the school system, and neither had any concerns or comments about the text amendment. Staff recommends amending the UDO to base the need for a TIS on the amount of traffic generated regardless of the land use, and requiring a TIS for large developments being submitted for planning board review. The planning board held a public hearing on November 12, 2020, and recommended approval of the text amendment. No one spoke at the meeting. The Winston-Salem City Council held a public hearing on January 4th, 2021, and approved the text amendment for the city jurisdiction. And again, no one spoke at the hearing. And I'd be happy to try and answer any questions you have.
Questions or comments? None at all.
Very good. Thank you, David. Agenda item number 2 is also a UDO matter. It is a public hearing on an ordinance amendment proposed by Planning and Development Services staff to amend the UDO pertaining to affordable housing bonus density provision. And Tiffany White with Planning and Development Services will review. Tiffany, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
We can. Just speak loudly and slowly, please.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I am here to present UDO-CC 7, which is from Planning and Development Services staff. It's a request to amend the UDO bonus density for affordable housing provision and the alternative parking incentives provision. As part of our current work program, the Planning Board asked staff to review the bonus density for affordable housing provision since it has been in the UDO since its inception in 1994, but it's never been used. The 2018 Winston-Salem Forsyth County Housing Study and Needs Assessment also recommended reevaluating this provision to see whether modifications could encourage its use. Currently, the provision allows for the following. For duplex or multifamily units, there is a 25% density bonus if 40% of the units are set aside for residents making less than 60% of the area median income, or AMI, or if 20% of the units are reserved for residents making less than 50% AMI. On the single-family residential side, there is a 25% density bonus if 25% of the units are sold or rented to residents making less than 80% AMI. Planning staff reached out to local affordable housing developers and the Housing Authority of Winston-Salem for feedback on the current provision and for suggested improvements. We also asked the county and the city's community development departments to review this provision. And we also did research on peer communities to look for innovative practices in this area. According to the developers, bonus density can be a useful tool, but it has not been an incentive for inclusion of affordable units in our local market for several reasons. Some of those being that the real drivers of affordability locally, according to those developers, were outside the scope of the UDO, including changes to stormwater regulations for projects within Winston-Salem, waived or reduced system development fees, and direct city or county funding for these projects. The community development and the housing authority staff did identify some ordinance language that needed to be updated to better reflect current policies and local provisions. Several of those had to do with changes within the Housing and Urban Development HUD process for affordability. As part of the research that we did on inclusion of affordable units in developments, one of the things that came out was that sometimes a reduction in required parking can be an incentive for inclusion of affordable units. As we researched this, we determined that for our local area, allowing parking reductions for multifamily units within a quarter-mile of legacy growth corridor or activity centers and within a quarter-mile of a transit line would further multiple planning goals in addition to affordability. Such developments would only require one parking space per unit, regardless of unit size, which would significantly reduce the development costs and the land area needed for the development. Currently, there are no parcels in the county that would meet the requirements for this provision, although such parcels may exist in the future. After holding a public hearing in October of 2020, the Planning Board unanimously recommended approval of UDO-CC 7, and City Council unanimously approved the amendment at its January 2021 meeting. And with that, I am available for questions.
Questions or comments?
I have maybe one. You're basically saying that two requirements, a quarter of a mile from the transit area and a quarter of a mile from the legacy growth area, that there is no parcel that meets the 2 quarter miles?
Correct. So the missing component is the transit. So currently, transit doesn't reach far enough out those growth corridors to include county parcels at this time. If there were a change in those transit lines, the length of those transit routes, it could bring parcels into compliance in the future.
So if you went to like I think I am understanding what you're saying. So for example, if you expand it to a half mile on transit, that's probably not going to it's not going to make any difference because it's not within those kind of distance. It's just stopping too soon.
Correct. Currently, as it is, it's stopping too soon. And again, we wanted to make this along those growth corridors because those are our larger, well-traveled arterial routes like Peters Creek Parkway, University Parkway, and those are the ones where that existing transit would likely stay and potentially expand since those are such well-traveled routes currently.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Additional questions?
Just one question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Do you have a definition of affordable housing unit?
So typically what is considered affordable are units that do not cost the person more than 30% of their gross income, whether that's rental or purchase. And so that's kind of a common parameter that is used by affordable housing and housing in general organizations, so not to exceed 30% of income.
Okay, thank you.
Additional comments? Thank you, Tammy. Tiffany, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
All right, finally, the last UDO amendment is a public hearing on ordinance amendment proposed by Planning and Development Services staff regarding use standards and definitions for family group homes. And Chris Murphy should be on the line to review this. Chris, are you there?
I am, sir. Good afternoon, County Commissioners, Mr. Chairman. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
All right, thank you very much. Yes, this is the last text amendment. This is UDO CC9. This is a request of Planning and Development Services staff, and we have drafted a text amendment modifying the definition of family group homes A, B, and C uses. The current UDO definition for family group homes does not provide a clear definition of what is meant by supervisory personnel. It's within the definition, but it isn't defined. This may allow for some family group homes to designate senior house members, i.e. participants in the program, as supervisory personnel, thus circumventing the intent behind the maximum number of participant residents. Family group home A uses are allowed in all residential zoning districts, the LO, IP, C, and MUS zoning districts with a maximum of 6 residents, excluding supervisory personnel. The family group home B uses are allowed in residential multifamily zoning districts except RM5, and also in some commercial districts, and the maximum occupancy in those units are 12 residents, exclusive of supervisory personnel. And the family group home C is allowed in all multifamily districts except RM5 and 8, with up to 20 residents, again, exclusive of supervisory personnel. The new definition does provide standards for classifying supervisory personnel. Supervisory personnel shall mean a person with any adequate licensing, such as a CNA, LPN, RN, MD, or similar medical or healthcare certification, who is employed by the transitional housing facility to provide for or supervise the needs of the residents and receives compensation for said care and supervision. In no case shall a resident of the facility undergoing treatment or receiving care be classified as supervisory personnel. Residents include, but are not limited to, handicapped persons, older adults, foster children, abused individuals, homeless persons, or those recovering from drug or alcohol abuse. This item was considered by the Planning Board at their December 10th meeting, and it was unanimously recommended for approval. And with that, we do recommend approval of UDO CC9, and I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Questions for Chris?
Well, I have one. If this were enacted, would there be any existing group homes that would be closed?
No, sir. There wouldn't be any that would be closed. There is one within the city that is currently going through the process for reasonable accommodation because they do have more residents than what is specified by the underlying district. And that's actually how we discovered this issue, because that was part of their argument, is that a couple of their members are senior House members and are supervisory personnel. So that's how we discovered the issue. It doesn't impact that House that will be part of the discussion of the reasonable accommodation, and any that had been permitted under the definition prior to it being changed that already have more residents than this would allow with the change would be allowed to continue to do so. But any new ones that we issue a permit for going forward, this definition will help prevent that.
Thank you.
Additional comments?
You're welcome.
Thank you, Chris.
Very good.
Thank you.
Agenda item 4 is a public hearing on a proposed ordinance to name an unnamed road segment located off Blues Creek Road within the unincorporated area of Forsyth County, be named Cruise Way, and Matthew Hamby will review this. Matthew, are you on the line?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon. Our office was contacted by a resident whose address is duplicated in the Stokesdale zip code, and they were requesting to have their driveway named. Their driveway is in the 8100 block of Blues Creek Road. Here you can see the proposed Cruise Way is highlighted in orange.
You are not sharing your screen at the moment, Matthew.
Okay.
Matthew, I can share my screen.
Is that working? Do you see that?
Yep.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay. Apologize for that. So as I was stating, this orange line represents the location of of Cruise Way if it's approved. Staff has completed the requirements in conjunction with General Statute 153A-239.1. We have made the notice 10 days prior to the public hearing. And staff recommends the naming of the Cruiseway off the 8100 block of Blues Creek Road. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Is this located near the Guilford County line?
Yes. The two addresses are about 6 miles apart.
Additional comments, questions?
Okay. All right. Thank you, Matthew. Agenda item 5 are approval of the minutes for the meeting of March 18th, and they'll be sent out probably middle of next week, if I guess that correctly. Item 6 is a resolution recognizing Forsyth County's 911 telecommunicators, and we have those both in emergency services and also in the Sheriff's Office during National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week. I know we'll probably have somebody from those offices available to kind of receive the recognition at the formal meeting. I had Kyle Wolf. Kyle, did you want to add anything to that?
I did not have anything else to add on this at all, but I know that they will be very appreciative of it.
Okay, thank you, Kyle. Agenda item 7 is a resolution recognizing April 12th through 16th, 2021 as the Week of the Young Child in Forsyth County, North Carolina. And I know we've got some folks online to present that, Lewis Finney Jr., Makisha Burns, and Leslie Mullinax. I'm not sure who needs to go first of those parties.
Lewis Finney will go.
Sure, I can go first.
Mr. Finney?
Yes.
Okay.
You all hear me clear?
Yep, you have the floor.
Okay. Thank you. I'd like to first say greetings, commissioners, and those guests who are here to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Week of the Young Child. And this is something that's actually celebrated nationwide. In Winston-Salem Public Schools, we're celebrating this April 12th through the 16th. And what I'm responsible for here in our county is Smart Start of Forsyth County. And what we actually do in this particular community is we impact about 11,000 children in Forsyth County each and every day. And the Week of Young Child Steering Committee would like to extend to the county commissioners the opportunity to participate in our event by signing a proclamation that we're declaring April 12th through the 16th as the Week of the Young Child. We'll provide a proclamation and photograph for your signing. And after we have your proclamation framed, we would love for you to symbolically present it to a young child in the community as we video the moment. But I also want to talk to you about why early childhood service is essential in our community. One thing that you all might be familiar with is that the current crisis has resulted in almost 18% of our early childhood programs in Forsyth County actually closing during the beginning of the pandemic. What's also interesting about that fact is that early child care programs were one of the few businesses that were operating from the time this crisis actually initiated in our community. Our providers were out there supporting the police, the firefighters, and the healthcare workers, despite the safety and well-being of their own. And we know that this work in child care and early childhood has been essential for years. But what I want to say to you is that the current pandemic has really solidified what we already knew about early childhood already. And again, I want to thank you for celebrating and allowing me to speak briefly, commissioners and guests, for this opportunity, and know that the celebration of young children in our particular county is not just for a month or for a week, but we like to celebrate our children every single day of the year. Thank you. Subject to any questions.
Questions, comments? Not a one.
Very good. Thank you. Agenda item 8 is a resolution recognizing April 2021 as Child Abuse Prevention Month in Forsyth County, North Carolina. And John Thacker with DSS should be on the line. John, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
Good afternoon, commissioners. As you guys know, April is Child Abuse Awareness and Prevention Month. Each year we bring this agenda item to the commissioners to review and to provide a proclamation. We, in solidarity with our community partners, work tirelessly to prevent child abuse, to link children and families to services that will better assist them to provide a stable environment for their children and remain in their care. And so this month is no different than our previous years in that we want to acknowledge our partnerships with our community partners and to bring awareness to child abuse and prevention services in Forsyth County.
Great. Thank you, John. Any questions for John?
Not a one.
All right, very good. Item 9 is the public session. Item 10 is an amendment to the FY 2021 budget ordinance. It increases revenues and appropriations for the Forsyth County Department of Public Health for Women's and Children's Health Section immunization branch funding from the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. And Adam Pendlebury should be on the line to present this. Adam, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yep. Just speak loudly and slowly, please.
Great. Commissioners, the item before you is a budget ordinance amendment. It's an amendment to Agreement Addenda 716 from the state in the amount of $901,202. These funds can be used to support COVID-19 mass vaccination. Be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions or comments? Okay.
Thank you, Adam. Agenda item 11 is a resolution authorizing the acceptance of a grant from the Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation to support local COVID-19 response and mitigation. You've got the associated budget ordinance amendment, and Adam will also review this.
Yep, and I'm grateful to brief this item. The Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation is giving us $20,000 to support local COVID-19 response and mitigation. Also happy to take any questions you might have on this.
Questions or comments? Okay.
Agenda item 12 is a resolution authorizing submission of an application to the North Carolina Division of Parks and Recreation, Department of Natural and Cultural Resources to apply for and accept, if awarded, a Parks and Recreation Trust Fund development grant to fund the development of the first phase of Blues Lake Park. Mike Anderson and Chris Weevil with our park system should be on the line. Turn it over to you, Mike, or Chris?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Can, thank you.
Okay. Good afternoon, Commissioners. What item we're bringing before you today is a resolution authorizing submission of an application to the North Carolina Division of Parks and Recreation, Department of Natural and Cultural Resources to apply for and accept, if awarded, a Parks and Recreation Trust Fund development grant to to fund the development of the first phase of Blues Lake Park. What we are applying for is the maximum amount, which is $500,000. It is a matching grant, and we will use the $2 million that you've already set aside in PAYGO funds for that project as a match. It is in this year's cycle, the 2021 cycle. The application deadlines are May 1st, and usually the selection of the awards are in September, and it is for the first phase of the development of the Blues Lake Park. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Questions or comments? Not one. Dudley?
All right, very good. Thank you, Mike. Item 13 is a resolution approving an application to the Duke Energy North Carolina Electric Vehicle Charging Pilot Program and authorizing execution of the program contract document. Scott Angel with General Services should be on the line. Scott, are you there?
Yes, sir, I am. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
All right. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and Board. This resolution approves application to Duke Energy's North Carolina Electric Vehicle Charging Pilot Program, known as Park and Plug, and authorizes execution of program contract documents upon acceptance of the county into the program should that occur. The county's application will be for a fast charging station site. Duke Energy launched the Park and Plug program to better understand the impact of electric vehicles on the electric grid, the behavior of customers, and the financial and environmental benefits to the state. The program will help expand electric transportation and electric vehicle infrastructure to meet growing needs as new electric vehicles enter the market and sales increase. Duke is currently accepting applications for fast-charging electric vehicle charging sites along major highway corridors in its North Carolina service territory. As the name implies, fast charging stations are the fastest charging option available, and they can provide 250 miles of range on 1 hour of charging or 50 to 125 miles of range on 15 minutes of charging, depending on the vehicle and its equipment. So these stations are mostly used to facilitate long-distance driving and are usually found at locations along the highways. So they basically allow users to top off their batteries, grab some lunch or dinner at a local restaurant, and or spend time at a local place of interest while their vehicle is charging. All the stations will have a minimum of 2 charging units per site, and Duke Energy will provide turnkey charging stations, including the equipment, the installation, warranty, and network connection services free of charge. Duke will also pay for the operation and maintenance of the stations, and Duke reports that the normal cost for the installation of 2 fast charging units is typically $200,000 or more. The installation of the units will be performed by a vendor contracted directly with Duke Energy, and Duke will also be responsible for the cost of electricity used by the charging station and will charge a fee to users of the service via smartphone, RFID card, or credit card. Participation in the program requires execution of a 5-year contract, provision of a charging station location meeting all site requirements, access to the site, and reporting of annual usage to the North Carolina Utilities Commission. And the site requirements include the provision of 2 designated parking spaces in a safe, clean, and well-lit area, providing adequate ingress and egress, close proximity to highways, strong Wi-Fi or cellular service availability, 24/7 access, proximity to retail, restaurants, or places of interest, 3-phase power availability, distant from other vehicle fast chargers, and providing non-discriminatory access to electric vehicle charging spots, as well as complying with ADA requirements. And then finally, the provision of snow removal. All of the equipment and signage will be branded by Duke Energy, and applications are due on March 31st, so we'll actually have to submit an application before you all formally act on this resolution. Sites being considered for the application include the Kernersville Branch Library as well as the Clemens Branch Library, primarily due to their close proximity to Interstate 40 and Highway 421, as well as restaurants in addition to the libraries themselves. I did touch base with Kernersville and Clemens, and They confirmed that there is a lack of accessibility for charging stations in their areas. They currently do not have any, so this would help fill that void as well. So with that, I will close and try to answer any questions you may have.
Comments or questions?
Just one question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Any consideration of where these sites might be located at this point? Are they still developing a plan for that?
Well, our applications are going to recommend the Kernersville Branch Library and the Clemens Branch Library. So, you know, where they actually get, the sites they actually choose is unknown at this time. So I'm sure they'll get quite a few applications, but no firm locations yet.
Thank you.
Additional questions? Okay.
Very good. Agenda item 14 is a resolution of the Board of Commissioners of Forsyth County of Forsyth, North Carolina, authorizing the negotiation of an installment financing contract, directing the publication of notice with respect thereto, and providing for certain other related matters thereto. Paul Fulton and Lee Plunkett. Paul, Lee, you're on the line?
I am here. This
All
is
right.
Lee.
Okay, Lee.
So I've shared a presentation. I want to give everyone an update on where we're at with the sale of the limited obligation bonds. So, and that's as of today. So as we see here, this table, the rows in blue represent the new money portion of the financing for the projects that we have discussed in the past. The court facility, Caladium, and the airport. The court facility is at $102.15 million, the Caladium at $23.85 million, and the airport at $17 million. The two rows in orange represent some additions to this financing. So like the general obligation bond sale, we've identified some savings associated with refunding some currently outstanding debt. And in this case, it's the 2009 and the 2012 LOBS. And that's for a total of $17 million. So the total financing will be $160 million, of which $143 million will be new money for projects. And I've added a tax designation column to the right because we've decided for a few reasons that a portion of this financing should be done on a taxable basis for the county's benefit. And I'll go deeper on that on the next slide. So here are a few highlights of the financing. First, unlike the general obligation bonds that only require the county's full faith and credit, in order to sell the bonds, limited obligation bonds require collateral. And for this deal, the collateral will be the court facility. And this also leaves the airport free of any liens on its property, which could prohibit any future plans or projects that might be pursued. And then next, if you remember, we entered into a financing with PNC Bank to begin the court facility project. It allowed us to only draw down funds as we needed them and to kickstart the project. So this LOBS financing will actually pay off this PNC Bank loan, and then the remaining amount of funds after the payoff will be used to finish the court facility project. And as I noted in the previous slide, we're refunding the 09 and 12 LOBS that were used to construct the public safety center. The expected savings of refunding both of these outstanding issuances is around $2.5 million over the next 10 to 12 years, which is great. And that leads us back to the tax-exempt versus taxable designation. So based upon discussions with our bond counsel, their tax attorney, and then our financial advisor, we believe issuing taxable bonds for the airport projects are the most advantageous for the county. Since private businesses rent much of our space, taxable bonds allow us to avoid what the IRS calls private activity issues. Normally, for tax-exempt bonds, it's only allowable for 10% or less. So this allows complete flexibility for the airport to pursue its plans for growth. And also, on the refunding side, there's going to be a portion that's taxable as well. A few years ago, advanced refunding of tax-exempt bonds was taken away. That's not allowable anymore. So many local governments now issue taxable bonds to refund outstanding bonds that cannot be called yet. And so this allows us to refund our 2012 LOBS since they're at such historically low interest rates. And I wanted to provide a quick review of the schedule of board actions that allow the county to enter into this contract to sell the limited obligation bonds. And so what we're briefing today is the initial resolution, which we're asking you all to approve at the April 1st meeting. This kicks off the process, and similar to what we did with the general obligation bonds, and I'll go into what the resolution holds in the next slide. After the April 1st meeting, there'll be a public hearing on May 6th, and then after the public hearing on May 20th is the final meeting where we will ask you to adopt the approving resolution, which gives the final okay to sell the bonds. So the actual items in front of you today are what we call the initial resolution, and the action steps within the resolution are noted in different sections in the resolution. And section 1 is the authorization to negotiate the contract to sell the bonds, and this is in accordance with our general statutes 160A20, and that allows us to place a lien on the court facility as collateral, as we discussed. Section 2 directs us to officially apply for approval of the contract by the LGC. In Section 3, it actually codifies a policy that we've been following the past several years. The Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, issued a rule 15C212 that requires us to disclose certain financial events, and so we're just finally putting this on paper, and you'll see the policy is attached to your item. Section 4 provides us with the authorization to retain professional services. So, as always, we retain bond counsel and our financial advisor, and I'll be presenting the engagement letters to you soon. But it also allows us to retain professionals like the underwriters, trustees, rating agencies, title attorneys, and any other services that we need to complete the sale. In Section 5, it sets the public hearing date for May 6th. And then Section 6 directs us to publish a notice of public hearing in our local newspapers. So I know that was a lot, but I would be happy to answer any questions.
Questions or comments?
I've got one question, and it's kind of a little one, and it may be silly, actually, but it really goes back to the process of a couple slides back where you talked about the PNC Bank, where you're going to do, I assume, temporary financing. That pays off the PNC Bank draw program. That's going to pay the contractor until such time as the LOBS are in place, correct?
Yep, that is correct.
So an interesting question I have is, why don't we just use fund balance to pay that off and not bother to not pay any financing charge to PNC Bank, pay ourselves back? Because I guarantee you that whatever the low interest rate is, it's going to be less than what we're making in investment income off of our fund balance, and then just pay ourselves back. It's about a 5-6 month process with the cash. So it'd be a quick cash flow return on that and save some money. Why would we not do that?
The problem, Dr. Martin, is there's a clawback provision. If we go too long, we can't pay ourselves back. And so we weren't sure how long it would last, but the law anticipates that we would do a short-term borrowing in this situation.
So I was right in my thinking. So the question becomes simply one of how long it takes the LOBS process to complete and what that limit is, what that time limit is.
And it goes all the way back to when we first started making payments. So the clawback provision can run for a pretty long time. And if it starts running and becomes negative for us, then we can't do the borrowing to pay ourselves back. So that's what we were trying to eliminate, was any risk to us that we would loan ourselves money and not be able to pay ourselves back out of bond proceeds or out of LOB proceeds.
Yeah, the PNC agreement's been in place for a while, and it had to be because you can only claw back 6 months. And so, but you're correct. I mean, for the period of new borrowing, you could do it for a short period of time, but we've been spending money on the courthouse project for a pretty long time, actually. So
right,
yeah. So,
and I think the other thing is the interest rate on the draw program is incredibly low. So,
but it's not lower than what we're making on our investments.
Everything is low right now. It may not be quite as low, but it's not far from it. And in fact, that's the reason we're going into the market with all these different things we're trying to fix. It's kind of a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to get all the debt we have at the lowest rate we can possibly get it at.
Oh, yeah, I'm all for
Yeah.
all this. I got it, and I'm for it, and it's great, and I'm happy. But I'm also happy if I can save some more money. I mean, it's all about saving money. I realize you're talking about being safer, I suspect, in terms of timing, but it seems to me the process, the date that we should have the LOBS available easily within 6 months. It seems.
Yeah, the planned sale date is in June.
Say what?
The planned sale date is in June.
But you can only go back 6 months from the sale date, and we've been spending money a good bit longer than that.
Okay, I won't waste any more time today. I'll think about it between today and tomorrow. I'll ask my question offline, not waste the time.
Okay.
One question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I'm trying to get some clarity on the advantage of a taxable bond. I know that as a small investor in my portfolio, I buy bonds because they're tax exempt. So what would be the motivation to purchase a taxable bond?
So usually the taxable bonds in the marketplace are a little bit higher interest rate than tax exempt bonds. So for some, for an investor, that could be a reason why.
Yeah, and most of our investors are sophisticated investors who have special provisions they're trying to meet in their own tax portfolio. But they are, they are out to make as much money as they can, and as Lee says, the taxable affords them more of that.
So
Or it usually does. Right now, it's just a small differential.
Okay. Do we have other facilities supported by taxable bonds in the county?
These are the first taxable bonds we've ever done.
Okay.
And they're really not for financial reasons. They are for the reason that we have private activities at the airport, and we're trying to keep that property free of any encumbrance. And the second is the advance refunding we're doing has to be done as taxable by federal law. So we're not going into this as an opportunity to save money. It's more an opportunity to protect our capital assets moving forward and have them available for anything we may want to do.
Okay. And final question, I'll be done. What are we selling these at, the taxable bonds? What rate are
So
we?
the latest run on the taxable bonds is the short term was right at 2%.
Okay.
The longer terms are pretty close to that, but they're wrapped in with the tax exempt, so it's a little bit. It would take a long time to work through it, but they're a little bit shy of 2% because they're a little bit longer maturity.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah. I think based on the question we're getting, Paul and Lee, we probably need to show the board the numbers. So maybe get with our FA and so we can kind of see what the real picture looks like. So
good idea.
Okay, we can certainly do that for the next briefing.
yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. Any other questions on that? All right. All right, item 15 is a resolution awarding a contract for the purchase of 34 LifePak defibrillators for Forsyth County Emergency Services. Carr Boyd, our Deputy Emergency Services Director, should be on the line. Carr, are you on the line?
Yes, sir.
Just
Good afternoon,
loudly
Mr.
and
Chairman.
slowly, please.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Before you is a resolution awarding a contract for the purchase of 34 12-lead cardiac defibrillators for Forsyth County Department of Emergency Services. The current version 1 12-lead defibrillator devices are at end of life, requiring replacement. These devices are used by paramedics to monitor patient vital signs such as pulse rate, blood pressure, oxygen saturation. Paramedics also use the devices to transmit EKGs to the hospitals from the field to activate catheterization labs, saving critical time. In addition to monitoring capabilities, paramedics use these devices to defibrillate, i.e. shock, patients during cardiac arrest, which is the single most important treatment linked to survival. 12-lead cardiac defibrillators are carried on all Forsyth County EMS ambulances and quick response vehicles staffed by the paramedics. The Department of Emergency Services and City County Purchasing issued an invitation to bid directly to 3 qualified businesses, as well as advertised on the City County Purchasing website and in the Winston-Salem Journal, resulting in the receipt of 4 bids that were opened on February 19th of 2021. The invitation for bid was for 38 devices, as this was the total number the county owns. One of the 4 bids submitted failed to include pricing for all items and was not considered for award. The 3 other bids were from Stryker Corporation at a unit price of $18,365, Code Blue Resources LLC at a unit price of $33,795, and then Supply Store Now LLC at a unit price of $50,999.98 per unit. Based on the review and evaluation of the three bids received, Stryker Sales Corporation was the lowest qualified bidder. These devices offered by Stryker Corporation are the same brand currently used by Forsyth County, and their bid included a credit for reclaiming the county's used devices. It's staff's recommendation that a contract be awarded to Stryker Sales Corporation not to exceed $715,226 for the purchase of 34 LifePak 12-lead cardiac defibrillators and the accessories that go along with those devices. I'm glad to answer any questions you may have.
Questions, comments?
I have one question. In fact, in the actual, I had a hard time getting the numbers to, I looked at the actual invoice part. But it does say, this is just a kind of editorial issue, it just says that the bid document, you're in the third paragraph of the resolution says 38, and then, of course, everything else is discussing 34. So I just think we ought to make that line up, because it is 34 units, and then there is this phone charge and extra batteries and all this other stuff to get to that. I got it, but there's just there's 38 in the third paragraph, and then everything else is 34. Minor issue.
The 38 was so that we could open it to all different brands, because we have a 38 because the award went to the same type of defibrillator that we currently own. We do have 4 newer versions that we don't want to spend the money to replace, and so that was why we reduced it back down to 34.
Okay, I hear that. And I just a curiosity question, that's a huge range between $18,000 and $50,000 per unit. I mean, what on earth is different about the $50,000 unit between the $18,000 one?
The rebate per device, the Stryker, and we had asked all bidders if they would be willing to do a kind of reclaim or a trade-in per se of the old devices, and so the Stryker bid included a trade-in. So we're going to swap out the.
Got it. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other questions on that? All right, item 16 is a resolution authorizing the execution of a grant agreement between Forsyth County and the North Carolina Department of Transportation to fund airfield drainage improvements, Phase 2 at Smith Reynolds Airport. Mark Davidson will review, and he is here. So you don't have to speak up or loudly. You can just, I think you can take that off, actually.
But you can speak slowly.
I'm sorry, what did I say again? Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and board members. A number of drainage improvements are required at on the airfield at Smith Reynolds Airport. A project called Airfield Drainage Improvements Phase 2 has been approved in the county's capital project ordinance, and funds have been requested from the FAA. Since North Carolina is a block grant state, the North Carolina Department of Transportation manages the federal funds on behalf of the FAA, and Forsyth County has been awarded a grant in the amount of $60,803. The grant requires a 10% local match, which would equate to $6,756 of the total approved amount. The project includes preliminary design, full design, bidding assistance, and environmental considerations for drainage improvements. So with approval from this board, the county can execute the grant agreement and proceed with this important project.
Questions or comments for Mark? You're perfect.
All right, let's go for 2.
All right. Item 17 is also Mark's. It is a resolution authorizing execution of a consolidated and restated lease agreement between Forsyth County and Signature Flight Support LLC for full-service fixed-base operation at Smith Reynolds Airport. All right.
Okay, so if you recall back on November, I can't believe it's been this long, November 5th, I presented plans for terminal area improvements. We discussed demolishing some old buildings, renovating the main terminal, constructing new hangars, improving some of the ramp, and rehabilitating an older hangar. During the presentation, I shared a number of steps that need to be taken, which included securing funding, which we just heard from our finance team, working with architects, and selecting construction firms. Another step I mentioned during that presentation was securing an agreement with our tenants to pay for these improvements. We need to pay that $17 million. Signature Flight Support is our current fixed-base operator at the airport. They provide a number of services to the public, including retail fuel sales, aircraft marshaling, ramp parking, hangaring, and aircraft maintenance. The current Signature Flight Support operating lease agreement at Smith Reynolds Airport will terminate on December 31st, 2040. Since it was formalized by the Airport Commission of Forsyth County back in 1978 when I was in 2nd grade, many changes in ownership have occurred, amendments have been executed, and so in order to update the language and allow for additional capital improvement, the county attorney and the staff recommends terminating that old agreement and executing a new agreement. So Signature Flight Support concurs with this approach, and a new 20-year agreement has been developed for your approval. The new agreement includes most recent rent increases, which took effect January 1st, as well as new rent for construction and other planned improvements. Other updated language includes required investment by Signature Flight Support and insurance minimums. With help from Fred Johnson, Chelsea Swain, the county attorney Gordon Watkins, we're able to develop a new consolidated and reinstated lease agreement that will provide growth and prosperity at the airport. Since this is such an important agreement and partnership, Jim Hopkins, the Senior Vice President with Signature Flight Support, wanted to say a few words and be present here today, if it's okay with the chairman and the board.
Absolutely. I saw him sitting back there and I thought, I wonder what he's going to talk about.
Mr. Chairman, Commission members, good afternoon. My name is Jim Hopkins. I'm the Senior Vice President of Signature Flight Support. We are the world's largest general aviation service provider. We have 200 locations around the world. And I take exception to the fact that our headquarters is in Winston-Salem, but our headquarters is in Orlando, Florida, but I live in Winston-Salem. Matter of fact, I have been through 10 mergers and acquisitions, and every time there is one thing that I insist upon is that Jim Hopkins lives in Winston-Salem. My family and I have lived here for the past 20 years, and we're glad and honored to be part of this community. This deal is exciting. It was mentioned earlier by your finance team that this is the opportunity to get things done. If you've been to our airport, you know that those facilities are very tired. But it's important also to know that those facilities were built with an agreement and a support and a partnership between Tom Davis at the time and the county of Forsyth. And it was that opportunity that helped the airport grow and helped Piedmont Airlines to become a major airline in this country. Today, we have another opportunity to do the same thing. This is huge. I had previous conversations with Mr. Kaplan, and I said, Ted, this is the opportunity for us to take Winston-Salem to the next level and to bring everything current. If you're aware of our contract, we recently increased our rates to the county, and our rental rates went up 5 times. Many people will shy away from that, but that's the agreement we signed, that there would be a market rate adjustment. We understand that, and we will stand on that, and we will make our business be proud and serve the community, understanding that cost. However, we can't do it without new facilities. I've been very honored to work with Mark, the airport commissioners, and the county staff, and we have a great plan to go forward. We have new hangars that are coming forward, and we have businesses businesses that are ready to put airplanes in these hangars. And they're not just $100,000 airplanes. They're airplanes that cost 20, 30, 40, $50 million. And they have to go inside when they're not flying, as you can imagine. So this is a huge opportunity for us. I also want to let you know, if you're not aware, that Winston-Salem has the busiest general aviation airport in the state of North Carolina. That is something to be very, very proud of. When business comes to this area, they fly to Winston-Salem, they step off of their $50 million airplanes, and they're here in this community. I promised Mark I wouldn't say this, but I'm going to say this puts us 5 minutes from touchdown to downtown. And that is huge when business comes a call into Winston-Salem. So I'm very excited by this opportunity. My company is very excited. And I will tell you that our Chief Operating Officer, when I told him I was going to be here today, asked me to please convey to you our appreciation for this opportunity. I'm glad to take any questions you
I think we just found you as our new best friend.
You're very kind.
Questions or comments?
Thank you all.
That was an exciting comment. I'm really impressed.
Thanks for being here.
Yes, sir.
Very good. Agenda item 18 is a resolution declaring certain county-owned personal property as surplus and authorizing its disposition by public electronic auction utilizing Liquidity Services Operation LLC, which you know as Gov Deals. Chelsea Swain should be on the line. Chelsea, are you there?
Yes, sir, I'm here.
All right.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. This item is to declare certain county-owned personal property as surplus and to authorize its disposition by public electronic auction. This will be on the GovDeals auction site, which is one of the marketplace options of Liquidity Services Operations LLC. We will be passing along all of the fees to the buyer as we began doing this past November. We did not see any negative impacts with that. That was the first time that we had passed along all the fees to the buyer, and we had a great sale in November, and we got just over $15,000, which is in market or in the same range as what we had been seeing from our sales. And the attached list represents all the personal property from different county departments. We do try to repurpose these items if we can, but we have to look at the condition, lifespan, usefulness, and uniqueness of the items. And if we find that we can't reuse it within our Fred's List program, we will put it on our surplus list. And this list is for the sale that would begin on April 12th and end on April 26th. We would be doing a viewing period, which would be by appointment on April 5th through 8th. And as we've done in the past, would also be advertising on the county website and Facebook. And I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Questions or comments?
Where were the two love seats?
The red ones, I believe they were at Public Health.
We can set an appointment for you to see those if you want to.
We can.
Another reason to lift up Gloria Wisenhunt.
All right.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you, Chelsea. All right, that's kind of it. You've got an item 19 is resolution approving refunds by the tax assessor collector in the amount of $606.90. And then you've got the reports as listed there. And that is what we...
Well, before we go into closed session, my question would be, why don't we just hold it here and I'll adjourn the regular meeting and we can go right into it if you want to.
I think that sort of, I believe that was the plan. Is that right, Ms. Ashley? Yeah, so we'll just do the public closed session here. Just a very quick, if we could just kind of open up for discussion and just give you a little information about the Rescue Plan Act that was recently passed. You've got information that NACO had put out on the site pretty quickly around the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. I know lots of folks are going to ask questions about that. And then just so you need, if you want to see it, the ratified Senate bill is this thing. And it's front and back, it's a ton of pages. And if you look at that, the funding, just at the table of contents, is about 3 pages long, and the local government piece of this is just one small section of that. And so I think we look at it in terms of it is a It's funds that have been identified to go to local government. We're going to receive them here in the not-too-distant future. But there is a lot more to this than just those funds, and it's a lot more to this than just what's in this NACO plan. And so I think that's one thing to keep in mind. But I'll turn it over to Gordon to kind of do a quick review and see if there's any questions or things that you need from us.
So I just have a quick summary of the summary, basically. But the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, the North Carolina share that the state will receive is approximately $5.3 billion. North Carolina K through 12 public schools will receive $3.9 billion. That's separate money. And then North Carolina local governments, which includes Forsyth County, will receive approximately $3.8 billion. It's been calculated that our county's share of that will be somewhere around $74.8 million, which will be distributed in two tranches. The first by May 10th of this year, the next a year later. It says no earlier than 12 months later, so presumably that's May 2022 or thereabouts. So that would be split in half, $37.4 million in each installment. The money must be spent by December 31st, 2024, so that's almost 4 years to spend the money. The Department of Treasury will issue guidance, but they've told Kevin Leonard of the NCACC that they're going to take their time getting out the guidance so it'll be correct. If you remember with CRF, they issued guidance, but they kept changing that, and so it could be a month or a couple months before we actually find out how we can spend the money. But broadly, there are 4 uses that are allowed for the county funds. One is very, very broad. It's to mitigate public health emergency or its negative economic impacts, which may include assistance to households, small businesses, nonprofits, or aid to tourism, travel, and hospitality. But as I'll go into a little bit later, there are many separate federal and state programs that already address those areas. The second category is to make up a shortfall in county revenue. So we would probably need to use fiscal year 2018 through 19 as our baseline, a pre-COVID year as a baseline. And what the NACO folks have told us is that it has to be an actual reduction in revenue, not a reduction in expected revenue. So if we expected revenue to go up 5% and it went up 1%, that may not qualify as a reduction in revenue. But what we'll need to look at is the different revenue streams we have separately. So you could look at property tax, sales tax, fees, park revenue, intergovernmental transfer, and other sources of revenue. So if any one of those is a shortfall, we may be able to make up for that with these funds. And again, we'll have to wait for guidance. It says that we can use these funds for water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure investments. And we're not quite sure what that means, so we'll need to get the guidance to see how broadly that is interpreted. But as it's written now, it seems very broad. And then finally, if we wanted to, this would be a county option, we could provide premium pay to essential workers. What we can't use the funds for is, well, at least it says explicitly, states can't use the funds to reduce taxes, to reduce the tax rate. There's some likelihood that the guidance will say that we can't do that either, but we'll have to wait for that. And we can't use the funds to fund pension. And so if we fund county salaries, we would not be able to include that pension part of those salaries. It says that we'll have to file periodic reports on our use of the money, but that hasn't been defined. Other programs, non-county programs that are included in this bill include another $21.6 billion to expand the emergency rental assistance program, and we should receive direct funding from that, as we have just received, and Chantel and Victor and folks with the city are standing that program up as we speak. There'll also be homeowner assistance programs and low-income home energy assistance program, and then various economic assistance to individuals, which would include TANF, earned income tax credit and child tax credit expansion. Of course, you've all heard of the payments of $1,400 to eligible individuals. Federal employment benefit of $300 a week will continue through September 30th of this year. SNAP, the food stamp program, will be expanded. And then the emergency paid leave and paid leave tax credit, that'll extend that program to September 30th of this year. There'll be funding for local and state health testing, contact tracing, and expansion of public health workforce. There's some funding for behavioral health, for vaccine distribution and education funding. There's support for Medicaid, including incentives to induce the 12 non-expansion states, including North Carolina, to expand Medicaid. There'll be $10 billion in state funding for critical capital projects to enable work, education, public health work during the pandemic, including broadband. There's aging services funding. Then there's a lot of education funding. There's $123 billion across the country to K through 12 education, including summer enrichment. There's an additional $2.75 billion for private K through 12 schools, an additional $40 billion for higher education, including community colleges, funding for distance learning, for Head Start, $39 billion for child care and development. And then small businesses and economic development support includes another $7.25 billion for Paycheck Protection Program, the PPP program, $15 billion for the Economic Injury Disaster Loans, $3 billion for Economic Development Administration, that's EDA, which from time to time we've gotten grants from them, $28.6 billion in relief for small and medium restaurants. That's on top of $109 billion in December of last year. And then there's an additional $1.25 billion for shuttered venues, which is music, performing arts, movie theaters, museums, and that's on top of $15 billion that came out in December. So as you can see, there's quite a bit in this act, which when we get the guidance, I mean, we'll start now, but when we get the guidance from Treasury, we'll be able to better determine how to spend this money. Again, we have almost 4 years, and we're going to have to be careful to coordinate with other state and federal programs. Obviously, we don't want people double dipping, getting the same relief from 2 or 3 different programs. So I'm happy to answer any questions. I don't know that I'll have any answers, but I would refer you to this NACO document, which the clerk has handed you, which is a very good summary of the American Rescue Plan Act, particularly as it applies to counties.
It sounds like there's something for everyone in there. What jumped out at me was affordable housing, which we've talked about in this county, and the definition of affordable funding is 30% of the total. I think we talked about that today. Then there's the SNAP program, which feeds people and from Second Harvest Food Bank. It sounds pretty good. Educational opportunities. And I think I heard as you went through that, even though the General Assembly has not seen fit to bring North Carolina into an improved area where they call it expanded Medicaid, it sounds like this particular program does do a little bit toward that, if I'm not mistaken. Further questions?
It would incentivize North Carolina to expand Medicaid. I would not hold your breath for that to actually happen.
Well, I hate to say it, but I agree with that, but at least it's an opportunity. Anybody else have any comments or questions?
I'd like to say one thing. I think I'm right, Gordon. Although we're getting estimated $74.8 million, the city's getting $55 million. So there's a lot of money out there.
That's correct.
Thank you. I hope there's some way, and I'm sure you all can figure it out. But we heard about our bonds today. I hope there's some way we can figure out to reduce Forsyth County debt. I think that would be as helpful to Forsyth County as most anything. I'm concerned about debt, not only in Forsyth but state and federal. I think we're headed for lots of debt. But Thank you for that, Gordon.
And just one comment, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
You know, this 74.8 million that we anticipate receiving, I hope we can pinch off just a piece of that to pay these people who've been working on Saturdays and sometimes on Sunday over and over and over again, given COVID-19 testing and or, vaccinations. And they have been in a Herculean mindset to get this done. So I hope there's somewhere we can give them some additional resource consideration.
Additional questions or comments?
Yes, Chairman. Gordon, my question is around, again, that $74.8 million as well. Was our allocation based upon the census?
I believe it largely was, yes. And this is, I didn't mention this, but every county is receiving direct aid. You remember with the CARES Act, we did not. And so the state took 80% of our money that was intended for us. And so this reaches down to even very, very small counties with 5,000 population. Every municipality of 50,000 or more receives direct aid from the federal government. And the smaller municipalities receive their money through the state, but as I understand it, the state has to give them that money. So as Commissioner Wisenhunt pointed out, Winston-Salem and Greensboro are receiving roughly 56 million also.
Sure. So the census, is this our allocation based upon the census, current census, or the previous census? Because I know the counting is still out.
It's not based on the 2020 census because that's not been issued. My guess is it's probably based on the 2019 estimate.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Additional questions, comments?
Just the only other point I would make is that unlike the CRF dollars, we had a real short window and we were scrambling the whole time. This one really has a long window, and I think there are going to be lots of guidance issued, lots of probably some technical corrections and things that that Congress does to make some changes with it as we go through. I did talk to Kevin Leonard today with the NCACC, and Kevin was told by the folks that issue that Treasury guidance that, one of the things that happened to them with CRF dollars is they issued Treasury guidance and then they kept having to change it, and so that was embarrassing and frustrating and confusing, and so they are going to, that guidance will come out more slowly. And so I guess heading into this budget, just know that we are doing a normal budget for Forsyth County. And so we are handling it just like a normal year with a reval, so we've got the complexities of that, but we are going along that pathway. And, whether this is a concurrent but separate path and separate discussion. I know they're going to interact with each other and there's going to be some involvement, but after this money's long gone, the county commissioners are still going to be setting the tax rate and aren't going to have these kinds of revenues. And so the big fear really is, do we, or the concern would be to make sure that we make good decisions so that what that long-term future looks like is made better by what we do now and not made more difficult because you've got to pay for things that you couldn't afford when you did them and those kinds of things like that. So I really do see a pay-go kind of mentality around this one-time money. It is a very large chunk of one-time money, but it really is an opportunity to do something transformative in this community, long-lasting, and hopefully the legislation and the guidance will allow us to do that. And so I really think in some ways we've got this guidance that's in front of us today, but what we learned out of CRF is they made changes to the CRF program and it extended it a year at the point where most jurisdictions had already spent it. So I do think going into this with caution, care, and a strategy is going to be important. So anyway, we're not trying to scramble to try to make something out of this year's budget. as a result of this, we're going to keep going on the same path we've been going on, and we'll present to you a good county manager's recommended budget that that's not really dependent on this.
It's good.
Well, I sure can't, I have to say, I agree with Gloria, yes, that when it comes to the budget, it's just like at my house, you just don't go into debt so high that you can't pay it all off and be comfortable. But with this other money coming available, it kind of gives you a tool to work with for the future, and I like that. Further comments?
Could I say something before we go into closed
Yes,
session?
yes,
I'll
ma'am.
hurry. I know y'all are in a hurry. But as you know, we have these virtual meetings coming up with our state representatives and federal. And I was talking with Ashley this week, and she contacted our state lobbyist. And she came up with some talking points and whatnot so that we can kind of be on the same page and act like we know what we're doing.
Mhm.
Did everybody get those, Ashley? Okay. But we do not have anything, I don't know what to say to the federal representatives, but we have a while before they come along, but maybe if we could all think about what we want to say, we would not take up so much of their time or ours.
Good idea. Well, if there's nothing further, let's adjourn and then go right back into our closed session. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Let me make the motion if I can. Need to ask the board to consider a motion to go into closed session to discuss a matter relating to the location or expansion of industries or other businesses in the area served by the public body, including agreement on a tentative list of economic development incentives that may be offered by the public body in negotiations pursuant to provisions of North Carolina General Statute 143, 318, 11A4. And since there's no other business to come before the board at this meeting, following the closed session, the meeting will be adjourned.
Motion to adjourn by Commissioner Fleming and Amin. I will second it. We're adjourned.